Hello, and welcome to the fourth session of our conference. My name is Dr. Winnie Soa, and I'll be moderating this session. Regenerative Aquaculture in West Africa. Let me give a brief profile.
Okay.
So our speaker for this session is Mr. Chris Goldblatt. He has spent 35 years in and underwater in every part of the globe and has been making a living from the sea in various capacities, understands the ocean on an intimate level. His vast exposure to the ocean and related issues has allowed him to see aspects of man's best relationship with the ocean leading far into the future. To ensure the long-term ocean health, he founded the Fish Reef Project, where they disrupt the convention by driving home direct action ocean health projects that have guaranteed and measurable results. The ocean is massive, and so are its problems. To fix them requires vision, big ideas, and bravery, all of which he has as director of the Fish Reef Project. He's a proud inventor of the Blue Credit System, which is a primary funding platform for large-scale ocean restoration projects that have been verified and have proven to come out to have guaranteed outcomes. So without much ado, I'd invite Mr. Chris Goldblatt. Your audience, let me share my screen so that you get your presentation slides.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Can you hear me, Madam Moderator?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that wonderful, inspiring introduction, and thank you to the show organizers, Mr. Landry Badmus and Grace, who helped me register. So thank you very much. It's a distinct pleasure to be here. I'm zooming in from Santa Barbara, California today.
Thank you.
So shall I just go through the slides, or
yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, I suppose I have quite a bit of time to talk, so I'll elaborate a little bit. In 2014, we became permanent observers to the United Nations International Seabed Authority, where we manage the international waters, basically, is what we do. And it's also a focal point for creating international oceans policy. And I had the distinct pleasure of being invited by the Ghanaian Foreign Office at that time to come over to Accra and investigate creating a fish reef project in Ghana as the hub for West Africa. Do we still have everybody there?
No, he has stopped using the slide.
Am I still online?
Chris.
Somebody wave if you can hear me. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hey, Stanley, how you doing, brother? Okay, so and that's where we met Mr. Stanley Capelli, who is the director of the fishery project in Ghana now. So can we pull the slide deck back up, please, Madam Moderator?
Oh, Madam Moderator has lost it. If she can
We seem to be having trouble with the slide deck.
Sorry about that.
Okay, well, here we go. Okay, so that was the beginning of the fishery project. So let me give it to you on a theoretical, conceptual basis, what the fishery project is, how it ties into regenerative aquaculture, and why it is so absolutely necessary for West Africa and all of Africa to embrace it, and what's really going to be necessary to make it scale. We can go ahead to the next slide there, to the first slide. Right, so maximizing ocean potential. This is probably the nexus of the entire thing. So in all of West Africa, you have a steep decline in landings, in fisheries, wild fisheries landings, especially for the artisanal canoe fishery. Starting in about 2010, we started to see a pretty good drop off, and it's not unique to Ghana. It's all of West Africa that's occurring. There are a lot of different reasons why that's occurring. That is a topic for another discussion. The question is, how do you fix it? What do you do? What do you actually do? And I know that the fisheries managers have tried very hard, but it's a great struggle to manage some of these fisheries. So the very best thing you could do is make more fish. That's the best thing that you can do. How do you make more fish in the ocean? How do you increase the potential? Well, the reality is most of the ocean is empty mud. It is empty. It's not lifeless, but there's just not a lot of reef structure down there. In Ghana especially, probably 95% of the seabed in Ghana is just mud. It's that shale-based marine ecosystem. Quite frankly, that's why you have oil deposits, because you have shale underneath that mud. So when there is fish and coral, it's limited to the small amount of complex reef habitat that you have down there for the fish to live on. And so when you place reef material, properly made, bioengineered, chemically engineered, structurally engineered reef material on the seafloor, you're creating more opportunity for more small plankton, phytoplankton for the animals, phytoplankton for the plants and zooplankton for the animals. You're creating more opportunity for that plankton to settle down and grab the reef structure and grow and become all kinds of marine life. And that's why you see the plankton in front of you. There are some estimates that think that we can increase the amount of marine life in the ocean by up to 20 or 30% just through improving habitat. So let's go to the next slide. Right, so plankton here you have in front of you, zooplankton and phytoplankton. Most of it dies. The ocean is full of plankton. If you think of it as like sort of pollen in the wind, it is everywhere. That's why when you drive a motorboat through the ocean in the middle of the night, it turns purple and it turns green when the plankton phosphoresces, because it is just ubiquitous. It is everywhere. But the reality is most of it dies and becomes what you call detritus. So you have to create more opportunity for that plankton to live. And to use the oasis in front of you, you can create an oasis in the desert of the seafloor through creating fish reefs. And so we're interested in creating very large oasis to increase the fish population in Ghana and in Senegal and other places in West Africa. Next slide, please. So it's not just enough to protect the ocean. There's a lot of that going on around the world where they rope big areas off, call them marine protected areas, and more life occurs in there. And that's great. It does have its place, but it's essentially a park that you cannot extract food and life out of. So you have to go beyond protecting, and you actually have to enhance, right? You have to enhance. That's the key operative word here, is enhancement. And a lot of times when people want to come to countries, I realize you don't necessarily have a big scuba diving industry in Ghana, but a lot of times when people come, they want to be part of the solution. Visitors is a trend now, ecotourism. They want to be part of the solution, and making reefs can certainly do that. Next slide, please. So reefs are commonly used around the world. You know, they use them. We've used them. We've just made 400 acres of reef here in California, one of the world's largest artificial reefs by spatial size. They're used throughout the Middle East as mitigation for oil and in lots of the world. But one of the fundamental issues is that they lack size and scope. So a lot of times there's one pot of money available and it gets used up, and the reef makers make the reef and then they leave the country, and there's no money for science. And so what you've done is you've created a fish attraction device. You've created a magnet for fish. You have not created what we call and I have coined the term a biogenic reef, which is a reef that mimics nature's form and function. When you look at it, it looks like nature put it there, and it's so large that it actually makes life and exports that life out into the open area instead of attracting it to it. It creates interest in the bank account. It creates a dividend. And that's why we created the Blue Credit system, to create that robust funding mechanism to fund the reefs, which I'll get into in later slides. So please, next slide, please. Biomimicry, right? That's a fancy word for copying nature. That's a fancy word for copying nature. So what you want to do is you want to create a reef system that after it's on the seafloor for 10 years, you swim over it and it looks like nature itself made it. You don't want to have something that's obnoxious looking that looks like humans made it. You want to mimic nature to the best of your ability. And that's why we created the sea cave that you see in front of you. The next slide will explain the sea cave a little bit more. Sea cave. So this is our invention. It's intellectually protected with patent pendings and copyrights and trademarks. And we spent years developing this, and it's deceptively simple. Okay, it's designed to be highly simplified, to mimic nature, to where you have a huge amount of flat surface area on the top. They weigh about 1,500 kilograms, and that flat surface area is ideal for coral to settle, and in cold waters for marine algae to settle on it, and So, and then there's a huge amount of cave area in it for large fish to go. So you can have snappers and groupers and lobsters, which really are the target species off of most of the world in West Africa. And we can get into why it's so valuable to Africa to convert to focusing on those species instead of some of the offshore wet fish fisheries that we see now. Similar designs have been used in Japan for 60 years now. It's a lot of science. We chemically engineer the concrete. It's a very expensive, very heavy, very durable concrete that lasts for 500 years. And the pH of the concrete matches seawater, so the delicate corals land on it and thrive, whereas most normal concrete would repel the corals. That's an important point to make. And so it's cutting edge designed reef design. As you see in front of you, so this is what our molds look like. They're two-part molds. You just pour the concrete in the top, let it sit overnight, pull the lid off, pull the sea cave out. It's designed to be simple, and it's designed for mass production. So when we ultimately get our funding for our West Africa or any of our major projects in Africa around the world, we ultimately will have as many as 2,000 of these molds that you see in front of you placed in a 10 hectare facility that will use about 7,000 tons a month of raw concrete materials that will all be purchased locally. And there'll probably be ultimately hundreds of people employed locally to produce these reefs. Next slide, please. So these are some of the finished products that we made in Santa Barbara that are now deployed in Mexico and on the East Coast of the US and out towards the South Pacific. They're designed to stack, which can be a real issue for reef material. So we can stack as many as 1,000 of these on a standard barge when they go 5 high. You can see the feet are almost 12 centimeters thick. So when they settle in the sand, there's still plenty of room for fish to get in. They don't subside in the sand. They're very, very durable in extremely high wave conditions, so they're not going to move around and wash up on the shore. Next slide, please. And then in some cases, we stack tetrapods into a pyramid shape in deeper water and make a pyramid out of the tetrapods, and they lock together. And we put that maybe in 30 or 40 meters of water for some of the bluer water fish. We make just a few of those out in the deeper water. The ideas are to make shallow water reefs, medium water reefs, and slightly deeper water reefs to make sure that a fisherman can start in shallow, fish throughout the day, go out deep, and then come back in shallow again. Next slide, please. So on similar reef units, this is about 5 years of growth in a highly tropical ecosystem. Ghana's a little bit different, but you do have some corals. And this is just to give you an idea of how coral itself grows over time on a similar reef unit system that are dome-shaped. But the concept is very similar. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is about 8 years. This is in the Caribbean. Again, the idea is that it's so covered with coral that you cannot see the original reef unit at all. And so that's the idea, is to make it look completely natural in the end. And then, of course, all that cave area in the middle is where the lobsters, the snappers, and the groupers reside. Next slide. To help things along, we can plant coral on them, and that may be possible in Ghana and certainly in Senegal. And so if we find that a reef unit is not performing the way we want, we can actually create a coral grow out system and then plant the coral on the reefs in little discs to ensure that you get coral growth. And you see a lot of struggling coral reefs around the world. So by making very large reefs and planting coral all over them, you can stay ahead of the coral bleaching and the coral die-off, because a lot of times the coral is at the very center of the ecosystem. Next slide, please. So drought, food, and job security. These are sort of the trifecta of why reefs are the most perfect solution that we can come up with for regenerative aquaculture, because they're permanent. They regenerate, and they don't require any fresh water input. Even when we construct the reefs out of the marine concrete, we pipe in salt water to make the concrete, not fresh water, because we don't want to use up all of Africa's fresh water. So that's a very important aspect of it. And we've done a lot of tests in it, and it's just as strong to do it that way. Permanent food security and job security. For every job created at sea by enabling a fisherman, you support 6 jobs on land. So there's a huge knock-on effect in terms of permanent food and job security. Food sovereignty, to where more food is just made domestically in Africa for Africans by Africans. That's a very important thing moving forward into the future as African nations fully solidify their separation from basically historical borders and boundaries, basically the colonial past. True independence requires food independence. I'll just say it straight out. That's the truth. Next slide. The Great African Food Reef. So this is not science fiction. This is reality. And it requires very large facilities of 10 hectares and 130 meter custom reef deployment vessels, which we'll show you in a moment. We would very much like Ghana to be our West Africa hub. We've made a number of trips there, met with all the ministries, have been very well received by the fishermen. But there is very strong interest from Senegal and Nigeria and other places. In East Africa, our hub is Djibouti, that's designed to serve Somalia and the Red Sea. We do have a conversation going in North Africa. So far, we don't have a hub up there. But the idea ultimately is to have 4 or 5 hubs that serve the entire continent. And that requires very large facilities. We're talking about increasing the native food production for almost 1 billion people moving out into the future. So this is no small thing that we're talking about. This is a very large long-term infrastructure project. And again, the blue credits as the funding mechanism enrich the governments and enable the reefs to be made in a large, profound, and very swift manner. Next slide, please. Right, fish reefs equal food for Africa. I think that's pretty straightforward. You can see Stanley there doing his outreach in the upper left-hand corner. So in the lower right, you have a dogtooth snapper. I think that's in Gabon. That's what we call an A++ fish, or the grouper, or the lobster. These are hand line caught fish that are caught one at a time, that are large, that are high value, very nutritious, and typically are not smoked. They're typically eaten in a fresh manner. So it reduces the anemia problems, typically in the female population, from eating too much smoked fish. And it allows more fishermen to have more jobs and more people to make more gear for more fishermen, in converting away from some of the gillnet and purseine offshore fisheries, which conflict with the Chinese trawling fleet, which conflict with oil. So fishing closer to home, burning less fuel, catching higher quality fish, more valuable fish is where it's at. Next slide, please. Right, it's a little bit distorted, but this is a depiction of what the sea caves themselves would look like with coral all over them. Something like that, except there will be tons of fish and crayfish and lobsters in them. So this is just to give you an idea of what a sea cave on the seabed covered with coral would look like. Next slide, please. Incredibly stable in the seabed. This is meant to depict a cold water ecosystem with our giant kelp. We're also in the business of restoring our lost kelp beds in California. We have lost a lot of them because we've lost a lot of the reef material. So you'll see very large projects going in California. We have one going in Baja, California, which is Mexico, but it's just over the border. And you'll see a kelp reef starting there just next month. So next slide. This is just to give you an idea. The projects are much larger than $5 million, but with $5 million invested, just to give you a snapshot of the knock-on benefits, in Ghana, you would be benefiting about 620,000 households with just $5 million, putting down just 2,000 reef units. And that would support about 240 tons of fish by our best calculations. Increased in A++ catch fish, about $6 million to $25 million over about a 5-year period. So in terms of real return on investment for very large projects, you're talking about a huge return on investment, a large increase in tax base, less dependency on government subsidies. Next slide, please. So this is the actual reef making ship. It's in China now. It doesn't say helping ocean life thrive, but it will once we procure the first one. It's 140 meters long, and those are designed to hold 5,000 of our sea caves. We were going to actually produce them on the ship and deploy them, but we decided it's better to have a large land-based hub and then load the ship up with them. And on there, you'll have a full science team. Of course, you'll have a lot of able-bodied seamen that are hired locally. The full complement of crew. It has an unlimited range. So if Accra is our hub, it can service the coast, basically from Senegal to Nigeria is where it can service. Let's see if I missed here. We may have a small submersible out there on some day. Okay, so this is a top-down view of the ship. The sea caves stack in the stern, 5 high, and as you can see, when you deploy them over about a 100 meter by 100 meter region of sea floor, you would have about 500 of them spaced put on the sea floor, and then you would move the ship and do that about 10 times, and then go back to the port and reload. And then the people on the beach are busy manufacturing the sea caves, so it's a perpetual project. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we've done extensive outreach. Here's Stanley again. We've met with the Ghanaian EPA, the Foreign Office. We got a nice support letter from the Maritime Authority, signed support letter. Hi, Stanley. Who else do we meet with? Fisheries, anybody you can think of. The Commercial Fishing Association. There's fishermen in Elmina, and on and on. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the ministries of Ghana, but I also want to point out that for this to happen, and I'll explain when we get into the blue credits, it requires an absolute commitment from the highest levels of government. So that would be the president, that would be the prime minister, that would be the finance minister, working in harmony to bring the money into Ghana to make this happen. And I'll explain exactly how that happens. And after years of trial and error in Africa and around the world, that is the ultimate analysis in terms of what it takes to make these projects work. Our project in Papua New Guinea is kicking off next month, very large, very robust, and that's what it took. It took a relationship on that level, and that's where it's going in East Africa as well. Next slide, please. This is just to give you another depiction of what the sea caves look like. As you can see, it's very substantial. We lower them down on racks of 12. Everything is meant for high capacity mass production. It has to be large if you're going to keep up with the human demand on seafood and to keep the jobs rolling. It has to be large, right? We have to make big reefs. That block called a reef block is meant to depict what we would do. You would make a small reef and very shallow, probably for the crayfish. So very small scale fishermen can fish that reef on calm days. Then they would go a little bit further offshore and they would fish the reefs, where the bulk of them would be in 12 to 15 meters. And then outside of that, you would find a pyramid of the tetrapods for some of the blue water fish, the jacks and the snappers and the tuna. And then we would just basically make those every 10 kilometers up and down the Ghanaian coast. It's an ideal research opportunity for Cape Coast University. there would be research money provided by us to get out there and really do some good field work to help us document the success of the reefs. Next slide. We have projects all over the world now. They're starting in Fiji and Papua New Guinea and California and Mexico. We've been talking to Senegal for a number of years. It's a global effort, and we hope that at the highest levels this will be embraced in the Ghanaian government, and we can set up shop and get to work. There's no time to waste. Next slide, please. We set up a typical batch plant that looks like this, that can put out about, set up correctly, we can make about 1,000 of the sea caves in a 24-hour period, which is unheard of. For precast concrete, that is an astronomical amount of precast concrete. And it's because we've taken so much care in making this to where it's absolutely efficient to fill the molds and to pull the molds off. And then the concrete comes out and it goes directly onto a truck. It goes directly onto the ship. It goes directly into the ocean. We've pulled out all the stops. Next slide, please. Okay, so the blue credit. So I don't want to overcomplicate this. So let me just highly simplify what it is. The blue credit is issued by my private company called the International Marine Mitigation Bank, a California corporation. And it is a contract that guarantees 1 ton of marine life exists as a result of purchasing the blue credit somewhere in our global reef system. So that's what it buys, okay? And then there's typically a second half of that, which is exactly how many reef units we provide for a particular budget. So the way a blue credit typically would work is this. A government, a president, prime minister, finance minister would go to a donor nation, a friendly nation, maybe a nation that's building ports and harbors in your country, maybe the international, somebody who's supporting international oil, something like that. Or maybe it's just a third nation that wants to see your country thrive. And they say, hey, buy a block of these blue credits, buy $200 million worth of these blue credits from the IMMB, and donate those blue credits to our government, to the Ghanaian government in this case, or to the Senegalese government. And as a donor nation, they agree to do this. So here's what would happen after that. The finance ministry would take delivery as an asset that belongs to the Ghanaian government, that has the full value of that $200 million. What we would do is take that money and go build the 10 hectare facility in Accra, bring in the ship. We would place 200,000 sea caves over a 5-year period. And that would guarantee about 100 tons of perpetual sustainable marine life. Actually, it would probably make more like 1,000 tons, but that's what the guarantee is. Now, what does the Ghanaian government do with these blue credits? They have, now you are the beneficiary of the reefs. You have this piece of paper. What do you do with it? Well, we're working with the international communities, with folks like the World Bank and the IMF and other people that would ratify the value of the blue credit. And what that does is it would allow the government to do 3 things. 1, sit back and enjoy a potential yield of 1 to 2% a year, which in the case of $200 million, 2% a year would be a $4 million revenue stream per year for 20 years, just as a function of holding the credit, just be straight income. The second thing they can do with it is ask the development banks, the African Development Bank, the New Development Bank, the World Bank, the Asia Development Bank. Next time they take out a development loan, instead of putting up cash as collateral for that loan, they would say, will you take these blue credits instead of the cash? And we have been in very intense negotiations with the lenders to get them to say yes to that question. But they say, okay, we will take those credits as collateral. We don't need your cash. Let's go do the loan. And that opens up massive new financing possibilities for the government to build roads and bridges and schools and all kinds of infrastructure, because that 10% collateral that is typically expected on a development loan often is very hard to come up with, and the blue credits can replace that. They're absolutely corruption proof because we issue them, we manage all of the trading. They go through a blockchain. There's oversight by auditors like PricewaterhouseCoopers. Nobody can run off with these and do anything with them because we have absolute control over how they transact. And that's a lot of times why countries do not receive foreign aid, is they're worried about corruption. This breaks that cycle completely. The third option is liquidity, is just straight out selling them for cash. That option is being developed. It does not fully exist yet. But if you're sitting there enjoying the yield or using it for another purpose, in time, the option to sell them will exist. Or they can do things like sell them to the oil companies or to the countries building harbors as mitigation, because that's what they are. So sometimes mitigation in terms of offsetting environmental impact is never met. So if somebody comes and makes an impact in your country, you could say, here, buy these blue credits. We're already making the reefs attached to them, and then the government enjoys that cash. So that's how the blue credit system works. And these numbers sound high, but if you think about $200 million, sounds like a lot of money, okay? But if you think about making reefs all along the coast of Africa that employ literally and feed literally millions of people over decades and decades and decades, and that quality of life increase and that political stability and the lack of being affected by drought and international politics of food importing, it's a bargain. That is an absolute bargain, especially because we guarantee the life on the reefs. Next slide, please. Blue credit, this is just an illustration. 1 blue credit equals 1 ton of marine life. And that's what it is. It's 1 ton of generated marine life. And we're taking that ton of marine life and we're creating a financial product out of it that is used to enable the creation of the reefs. Next slide, please. I've spoken all around the world. I was invited by the UN to be a keynote speaker at the Blue Economy Conference. That's where we met folks from all over the continent. That's why we're working in Djibouti to service Somalia to the south and locations to the north, and even across the street in the Mideast from that hub. And that's, and the conversation continues. Next slide, please. This is our team in Santa Barbara. And this is in Santa Barbara. Now, we are a much bigger organization than this because we have Fishery Project Ghana, Papua New Guinea, Somalia, on and on, Mexico. We have a larger number of people, but this is the core, and our executive team that you see in front of us. And, we like to consider ourselves true believers in what we do. We've spent 12 years, most of it unpaid on our end. A lot of this has been self-funded from our own pockets to get it to go, because we have to increase the amount of sustained marine life through things like regenerative aquaculture if we want to have any kind of stable, bright future for our children. Okay, so you got off a minute. Next slide. Key deliverables, I already went over all of that. For a deal like I mentioned, the number would be about 14,000 blue credits. We would operate the vessel for 4 to 5 years. It would make 100,000 tons of marine life through deploying 200,000 sea caves. Of course, we would come and do massive site selection, stakeholder outreach, advise on a coral outplanting program if it's appropriate. And then we would do very intensive annual studies and provide the scientific studies to everybody, all of the stakeholders, so they can see the exact abundance and the social studies associated with that in terms of the benefits to the fishermen and the families on the beach. Next slide. Benefits summary. 30 million kilograms of marine life per year. That's a typo. It would be more like 200,000. Sorry about that. It would set Ghana as a world leader in ocean health. Africa really wants to be a player in the blue economy, and this is the absolute best poker chip that you've been handed, but it has to be put on the table, it has to be played. It replaces lost fishing grounds for when you've lost fishing grounds for offshore oil. I know that they close off very large blocks out there. You need to replace that fishing ground, and this is an ideal place to do it. We've talked to the international oil companies when we were in Accra. Unfortunately, they did not fund it. I must say that was disappointing, and they should step up and do the right thing, and they should write a check and get this going. I'm not bashful about saying that. It's sustained funding for environmental and fish jobs, increased tax base for the government, local job creation, food security. Again, for displaced fishing. If there is ever marine protected areas that come into Africa, the only way that they will ever succeed is if replacement fishing grounds are made for areas that are closed. Marine protected areas are an absolute guaranteed failure from the start unless there is replacement fishing grounds made in advance of a marine protected area. You can't just come in and tell people they cannot fish for a living. Frankly, it's a good way to incite violence. And would create the world's largest, our project, the Great Africa Food Reef that Ghana would be one piece of, would create the world's largest regenerative aquaculture system collectively. I think that's the last slide, huh?
The issues surrounding like a country.
That's it. Happy to take your questions.
Yeah. So there was a section.
Thank you very much, Chris.
My pleasure.
That was an interesting presentation.
And it's
now we are open for questions.
Sorry. The opening ceremony on Zoom alone was like
You can also type in your question in the chat for Chris.
they are collaborating with Nigeria. So the moderator, this moderator.
Any questions?
Session 2, the moderator, the women's week, the moderator.
Oh, the raised hand. Okay. Okay, there are no questions in the chat.
No questions.
Any raised hands? But I wonder, you mentioned something about education. So when the project is fully operational, would you encourage or would you have students intern with you on the project?
Yeah, yes, of course. That's always part of it. One of the biggest mistakes I believe that projects of all types make is that the engagement process is inadequate. You really need to engage with the local community on a very deep and permanent level. And one of the best ways to do that is through interns. And they ultimately can become paid employees as well, because it's a big national effort. So it's more than just hiring a couple of people. I mean, we're talking about a very substantial effort. I think I saw a question on there from Lanre.
Okay. Maureen says, is it always a success? If not, what are the challenges?
Is it always a success? Yes, it is always a success. When we put the reefs in the water, the reefs make life, and the blue credits guarantee the life. There's not one example where we can think of where we've made reefs where everybody wasn't completely thrilled. I believe the second half of the question was, what are the challenges? Is that what she asked?
Yeah. If there are any challenges?
Well, the main challenge is funding. Typically, when you get that, the rest of the challenges go away. So, right. So naming off the rest of the challenges is almost just sort of academic. I could sit there and complain about getting put in holding patterns by certain levels of government that maybe are too afraid to take a risk. That's always a problem. That's why you have to work at the very top. And I understand. I mean, that is not a problem that's endemic to Africa. I see that right here in California, where we have government agencies that love the idea, but sometimes they can be too afraid of act, because to do something that's a little bit different, people are worried about job security. They're worried about losing their jobs. And ultimately what happens is the people that embrace this usually get promotions in the end. That's usually what happens, because the ones that have a little bit of vision, a little bit of faith, usually prosper in the end through embracing it.
So we have another question from Lanre Badmus. He's asking how the Ghana aquaculture industry can benefit from the Fish Reef project.
Well, it can be seen as regenerative aquaculture. So if we can all work together to get government to pursue the fundings from outside donor nations, the entire project can be seen as regenerative aquaculture, which means, working with the West Africa Aquaculture Society and everybody's involved in aquaculture to gather resources and return benefits back to those communities.
But what do you, Mbaye Dieng Diouf, forgive me if I didn't get the pronunciation right, is asking what you plan for marine aquaculture in Africa.
Well, that's why we showed the grand plan of the Great African Food Reef. And once the blue credits are, let's say, in play to where governments are going to donor nations to ask them to buy the blue credits. Also, we were working on getting them to have a place in the bigger financial systems of the world, to where there's a money generator that's separated from the reefs that allows us access to perpetual, very large funds to continue the Great African Food Reef all around the continent. So that really is the big picture, is to increase food production through regenerative aquaculture across the entire continent and make Africa a leader in the blue economy sector as such.
Okay. So in Ghana, based on your presentation, it seems you've met a lot of the stakeholders in the fisheries sector, and they have embraced your idea. So what is holding you back?
Like I said, we were not given the opportunity to meet at the very high level, the highest level of government, which would be the president, the prime minister, and finance minister. So it has ultimately, from my purview, been cleared by all of the ministries. My understanding, and from my meetings and follow-up conversations, is that they are fully supportive of it. Certainly the fishermen is supportive of it. So it requires the president, the prime minister, the finance minister to say, hey, Chris, we got your back. We're going to go to a donor nation. We're going to get you that money. We want you to come here, make a permanent presence, and get to work.
Okay. Okay, so we have a few more questions here. Emmanuel Jerry is asking, are you currently conducting any surveys in Ghana?
Other than social surveys, no. That's a very good question. Typically, once we're funded, we will send our advanced science team run by Dr. Ryan Jenkinson, who came over with us last time we were there to meet with the international oil companies. And he will, I'll give him the directive and say, hey, we need to make 100 reefs that are about 2 hectares each over the next 5 years. So we need you to find 200 reef areas and then work with the stakeholders to narrow it down to the best 100 locations. And there's a whole variety of factors that go into that. You want to stay inside the trawling zone. You want to make sure you benefit the most Ghanaians possible. So where you put them in terms of Ghanaian access to it is really important. And then, of course, the marine biology component. What currents and seabed are going to create the fastest pop in life? So you take all three of those factors to determine where ultimately the reefs are going to go.
We have another one from Kai, who's asking how you deal with common issues that fail fisheries, such as overfishing.
Okay, yeah, I saw a question on about Freetown. Common issues, overfishing. Okay, so it's overfishing from one point of view, and no offense to the hardworking fisheries managers of the world, but another way to look at that is you can also call it mismanagement. Overfishing and mismanagement are the same thing through different lenses. And I know that certain people don't like to hear that, but that is absolutely the case. And one way to mismanage the fisheries is to not be proactive about enhancement. So if you're in the business of managing fisheries in Ghana, and you're not involved in enhancement through things like the Reef Project, you're missing a real opportunity to do a full and complete job, I would say. My other answer to that would be make more. So if you don't have enough fish, make more reefs and you'll have more fish. So make more to stay ahead, right? I mean, and that's why it needs to be very large. You have to keep up with the demands. Yes, there's a whole separate issue about offshore Chinese trawlers and things like that. We stay out of that. We wish the managers the best of luck in making that a more sustainable situation in the future, because that does affect everybody's livelihoods.
Thank you, Chris. We have another one from David Joseph, who's asking, well, there's a preamble to the question. As a civil society organization that works on climate change and environmental advocacy and community engagements and sensitization, how do we contribute to the sector to ensure there's access, availability, and affordability of seafood in all local communities of the fishing industry?
So Ghana, West Africa is very blessed through having a very rich artisanal fishery with the canoe fishery. They're very blessed by this, because ultimately what you have is you have a huge amount of people that have a culture built around the fisheries. And they have also figured out the lowest cost way to capture those fish. You know, myself, I was a fisherman for 15 years. So I understand the struggle intimately. So when it comes to providing the most food to the most people, what you want to do is keep those fishermen active. You want it, but you just need to give them more fish. That's the best way to keep the price down and closer to shore, so you burn less fuel. Yes, there are management issues that need to lay on top of that. Possible future seasons, possible future size limits, possible restrictions in net usage and size, and replacement of net fisheries with hand lines. Again, this is not my job. Those are just my opinions about what I can see the most people catching the most fish for the longest period of time operating like that. But to answer that question, there is a real social justice issue there, because, you know, where I live, seafood has just become for the elite. It's a rich man's food now, which is unfortunate because it's also the best food. It's the most nutritious. You know, I go down to my local market and fish costs $40 a pound. You want to spend $200 to feed 4 people in California? You could come over to my house for dinner and everybody has to pitch in. It's ridiculous. And I do not want to see that happen in Africa. And it will happen unless you increase the amount of fish that are available through making reefs. I can't hear you. You're cut off.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
He asked if you intend to extend this to Freetown, Sierra Leone.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because we have tried very hard, both in Liberia and Sierra Leone, because the water there is just absolutely perfect for what we're doing. The current, I forget the name of the current that goes all the way up from Ghana, all the way up to kind of the green water current. It tapers out around Sierra Leone. So the water becomes blue and you have more pure coral ecosystems. So it would be a very good project for Sierra Leone and Liberia in terms of creating stability from sort of creating post-conflict stability. We're very active in that region in Somalia, right? Because one of the best ways to ensure long-term stability is to ensure a long-term food supply. And a lot of political analysis, people in the policy world, you know, DC think tanks and stuff like that, they don't look at conflicts from that point of view. They look at it from gold and diamonds and dollars and stuff like that. But really what causes conflict is hunger.
Thank you. There's another question from Landry Badmus, who's asking in what ways the fish reef projects will contribute significantly to Ghana's aquaculture and agriculture economy.
Agriculture, I mean, it's in the ocean, so I don't know how to answer that one. I will say this, that to grow 1 pound of cow, I think I'm making this number up, but it's something like 15,000 gallons of water to grow that pound of cow. It's in the thousands of gallons of water. And you need acres or hectares of land for every single cow. So to make that same pound of marine protein on a reef, you need no land, you need no water, you need no petrochemicals. So therefore, you have less slash and burn and less carbon dioxide to convert the forest into farmland. And then the farmland that is currently used, there'll be less competition for it because more of the protein is made from the ocean. So you'll actually see farmers that maybe have access to more fresh water for their crops because there's less competition because more protein is being made through regenerative aquaculture offshore.
Hi. Sorry, I left unannounced. Didn't know if you
Thank you, Chris. So we have a question from Colin Stodu, who's asking, the project is capital intensive, but do you plan to develop models that makes it easy for individuals to own these reefs?
No, any individual can access the reefs. I mean, obviously, if there is turf where fishing co-ops are, say that's our piece of ocean and only we get to fish there, that's a local issue that we stay out of. Different countries manage access differently. But theoretically, they are for all people. Anybody can access them. So as a Ghanaian, if your government paid for it, you own it. You have access to it. You don't have private title to it, though. No, that's not how it works.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any more questions? I think we have about 2 minutes to go. More questions before we let Chris go? Any final remarks, Chris?
Yeah, sure. It was an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. If anybody wants to connect about the project, please reach out to Stanley Capelli. Sorry, I always butcher your last name, Stanley. Right? Or Lunray, and we can follow up. We are open to working anywhere in Africa. We would very much like to get this going in Ghana because we have years now invested in Ghana. So we would like very much to get it going. So we need a collaborative effort. We need everybody to pull. Certainly informing your government that this is something that you want to see happen is probably the best thing that you can do to make it happen.
Thank you so much. So there's a final question.
Okay.
David is asking if there's any opportunity for funding for civil society organizations.
Once we get going and once we're funding, we will have collaborative efforts with other CSOs, and you can talk to Stanley about that once we get going. There will be grants. Anybody that can help us engage the community, there will be grant opportunities for that once we're funded.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we can bring the presentation to a close. Cheers. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay well and healthy over there.
You too, Chris.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. I think we'll have a video from the chamber.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Suwa, for choosing this. I think the fish.
Doctor.
I think.
Dr. Dodi, your line is being very funny. Your connection is breaking.
Sorry, we lost him.
Oh, okay.
Sure. We'll continue with the video.
Okay, is it better now?
Oh, okay, he's back.
Yes, please. It does seem a bit faint, though.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Joe, I just wanted to give a few announcements. Tomorrow we would continue with the online sessions, and we are starting at 9 a.m. We are going to have oral presentations from a number of abstracts that were submitted.
Okay.
So I encourage all participants to log in to 9 o'clock a.m. GMT. So I'm sure in Nigeria it will be around 10 a.m. And then from other parts of the world, either plus or minus a
Let
few
me start
hours.
the video and
So
edit the
please
session.
take notes and then join us tomorrow for the other sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll see you all tomorrow.
yes. Can't you accept this? Hey, Aqua God.
Okay.
Hey, big man. Who bonk? So you on the screen now?